In January, I created a video called 4 Habits to Create in 2020, which I will list in the cards above. And I got a few messages from you guys asking me to explain in more detail each habit. And so today we're going to talk about how to stop comparing yourself to others. Okay, let's just jump right into the video. Number one, understanding why. If you can understand why you feel compelled to compare yourself to others, that goes a long way towards stopping this habit of comparing yourself to others. I've worked on this a lot. And so I want to share some of the tips I found that has been tremendously helpful in helping me stop comparing myself. But first, I want to say there's usually 2 reasons I find that people compare themselves to others. One, you feel like something in you is lacking. Something that you are, who you are, something that you do, your life feels lacking to you. And so when you see someone else having it, it leads to feeling of jealousy or comparison. And so that's one of the reasons I found. Another reason that you compare yourself to others is because you care what other people think. You feel how this person thinks, acts, is something that's admired by others, and you want to be admired by others as well. And it almost becomes a competition instead of community over competition. I really like that phrase, that no tag phrase now. It's competition over community, and that is a problem. Caring about what other people think is a habit. It's a co-habit that leads to the habit of comparing yourself to others. And if you can just create a plan on how to change that, even if you make a 1% change at a time on this habit, it will be so helpful. In the book Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about it, how just little changes at a time will lead to an exponential change. It's a compound effect change. And so think about one little change you could make in your behavior and your thoughts that could help. For instance, start by unfollowing people in social media who are making you feel that way. A few years ago, I found this girl on social media and I thought she was amazing. But every time I saw her feed on Instagram or a post on Facebook or a video on YouTube, I felt jealous. It made me feel so less than. And that drove me insane. It drove me insane. I did not want to feel like this. This was a lovely person that I really should have spent my time admiring. Instead, I spent my time just feeling bad every time her stuff came up. And it drove me insane. But I finally unfollowed her as I worked on these things, and I worked on it, and a few months later I was able to follow her again. And when I followed her, I did not feel any of those feelings. I felt good, I felt happy, I felt inspired. And so start by unfollowing people on social media as you work through the through the mindset, through the habit of not comparing yourself to others. You can do this for people in your life as well. Just spend less time with them as you work on this bad habit. We talked about understanding your why, but it's also important to journal your why. And really, journaling your why helps you understand it, but also helps you solve the issue. I mentioned earlier that every time you feel the urge to compare yourself, it's because you feel some aspect of you, who you are, how you live your life is less than, or is in some way unagreeable to you or others. One thing you could also write down is, if someone was comparing themselves to you, what advice would you give them to help them feel more secure and less in need of that comparison? Remember that girl I unfollowed on social media and then a few months later followed again? As I journaled, I realized that I felt that her success was something I could never have because I didn't have her looks, I didn't have her skills, I didn't have her amazing demeanor. So then I wrote about those aspects of my life, of myself, my looks, my skills, my demeanor, and I wrote about, okay, what can I change? What do I want to change? What don't I want to change? What's just an essential part of me that I can't change or don't want to change? Turning my business into a success was totally doable, but was I willing to be okay to be on my journey without having someone else's journey overshadow my own? Was I okay with that? I also realized that comparing myself to others was the way I was raised. I often heard the adults around me comparing us kids to each other and to other kids, and I heard them constantly comparing themselves with other people. It was as if the only way to measure your success, your looks, your achievements, or anything was by comparing yourself to someone else and finding yourself better and finding them lacking. It was definitely something I noticed as a child, or I realized I noticed as a child, but didn't understand I noticed it until later when I journaled. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that's helpful is just taking the time to think through what they had to do to get where they're at. What was it that they had to sacrifice? What was it they had to spend time on? What did they have to do to get where they're at? It makes you understand that what this person had to go through was just not a pretty picture or a pretty post or a pretty video. They just had a lot to put into getting that exact aspect of their life to look the way it did. This writing session was just amazing. I felt like I solved so many issues, not just even about that, but so many other things around that time period of my life. I felt like the growth I experienced was exponentially faster and better than it would have been if I hadn't sat down to understand and figure out my why. I am highly competitive. I feel the urge to be the best in all areas that I apply myself, which is ridiculous and impossible, really. It's something I've been working on for years. And the reason it's ridiculous and impossible is that there's always going to be someone better than you in anything. That is just life. There's always gonna be someone better than you. Even if you're good at the best at this, someone's gonna work hard to be the best at this at a different stage. And if that's all you're gonna use to figure out if you're good enough, you're always gonna lose. So the better thing to do is to look at what someone else is doing that you admire and figure out, oh, how did they get there? You can learn from it. Figure out the A to Z of what they did. And then this is where it gets tricky. Do not decide to copycat their lives or clone their lives, because you can't clone it. You are a unique person. They are a unique person. I'm a unique person. It's impossible to have everything we do work perfectly for someone else. Instead, what you need to do is figure out, okay, what did they do and how can I apply this to my life? How can I do something similar that will work for me to have this thing that I admire so much? Because if you're taking the time to learn from them, then you're not taking the time to just sit there and compare yourself. Instead, you're learning, you're improving, you're growing. So when you see someone doing something that you admire that would, in another case, make you jealous, instead stop that mindset, stop that thought and think, what can I learn from them? And then go on from there. I love the quote by Albert Einstein that says, Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. I don't like that word, but that's exactly what happens. If you spend your whole life comparing yourself to others, you have no idea what's going on in their life, the experiences, anything like that. And so you will always feel less than because you're different. The only person you can ever compare yourself to is yourself.